been using this for the last almost more than a year plus.
Yeah.
Got it. When I present, I'm going to just go off video.
Yeah. Do what you want. Yeah, sure.
Live streaming started.
I'll start. Yes, sir. We'll start, sir. I'll just take a minute to tell some important programs so that I'll give some allowance to the people who are just logging in, so that we'll get some numbers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, very warm welcome to another edition. We all got the fragrance of business back again after a long time. We are going to listen to another Ponds veteran speaking to us, and outstanding session, which is very inspiring, which will Mr. Balram introduce you. Before that, let me briefly tell you what's happening. 2-3 very important events, the number of events which are being hosted by MMA in the month of November. What I do not want you to miss it is on the 1st of November, we have an event with the Government of India Income Tax Department, the changing environment of tax administration. So about 20 income tax officials, including a couple of commissioners, including the chief commissioner, is coming to MMA to attend to all your queries. Thanks for sharing all the questions which I already shared with them, and it's almost a good registration. More than 200 plus are registered. I'm quite sure you have a lot of queries. You have a queries. You watch them live. You can share your questions so that all your concern could be addressed in the platform. I think it's great for Income Tax Department to come forward and share their concern as much as you are concerned. What's happening in terms of so many issues of Income Tax Department. Then we have a women's forum event on the 9th of November. Then I want to share with you our flagship event is happening on the 18th of this month. That is MMA All India Student Management Convention. That is Future Proof Your Career for Success. One more last thing before I move on to the event today. We have our startup series this month discussion. We have Tarun Mehta, co-founder of Ether Energy, is going to be talking to Mr. Shankar. All that is going to discuss is the future is electric. Ether manufactures electric scooters. That's what's happening. Besides that, we have a number of events, some brilliant speakers. We're also having an event along with IAMA Alumni Association. We are doing something on stress management. Then we're also doing something on very, very interesting technology is a boon, bane, or bewilderment. And that is happening with IIT Professor L.S. Ganesh and Medal Raju is going to be talking to us. Then we have another interesting event on 29th, positioning India in the new world order. We have got a team of German delegation coming to us. This is happening at Leela Palace. Now, coming to today's event, we are all eagerly looking forward to this event. I know, Amrit, how much we have been after him for him to speak on this subject to MMA, because we thought this subject is so interesting and it will provide great insight to all our members, and also thought-provoking. It will kindle the thought process of many in terms of the science and art of marketing. The discussion for this evening theme is the science and art of marketing, the practitioner's perspective. Wish I knew that then when I wish I knew then what I know now. It's an interesting topic. Let me have the privilege of welcoming our distinguished speakers for this evening. Our chairman for this session this evening, Mr. Balraman, past president of MMA and former MD of Ponds India. Then we have Amrit Thomas, who will be sharing this. Then we also have a very special invitee with us, who is again a specialist and business advisor in the field of marketing, Neeraj Chandra, business advisor. Now, before I hand it over to Mr. Balraman, let me have the privilege of introducing the speakers. Before that, let me also warmly welcome all the viewers watching this program live on our various social media portals, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and also our webinar. Please share your questions if you have any. You can put them on our the numbers which is being flashed on your screen, or you can, all the viewers watching this program in Zoom, please type your questions, and all your questions will be, the speakers are delighted to respond to all your questions. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Balraman, though I'm doing it a long time. Let me do that. It's always a privilege to do that. And MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, former MD of Ponds, former export director of Hindustan Liver, and was independent director of Nokia, Mahindra, Well City, Polaris. And he also chairman of CAMS Footwear Design and Development Institute, and currently is on Delphi Nippon Electricals, past president MMA. And he's been singularly advising MMA. He's been my personal mentor, always guiding us to move forward. Some of the things which got transformed during the pandemic by introduction of the Ponds veteran serious fragrance of business, that changed the entire outlook, and that made us go online, digital, and they know looking back. So we are doing so many events. Even though we are doing events at MMA, we made a hybrid event, so that large number of events, a large number of viewers who got used to MMA watching online, we do not want to lose you. We will bring you every event online. Wherever you are, please keep logging and continue to watch it. Let me have the privilege of introducing the distinguished speaker for this evening, Mr. Amrit Thomas. Amrit is a seasoned FMCG executive with over 30 years of experience. Spent about 13 years Diageo, 16 years with Hindustan Unilever. Most recently, Amrit drove the marketing of digital transformation as a chief marketing officer of Diageo Europe. And prior to that, he was the chief marketing officer of Diageo India. At Hindustan Unilever, he led beverages businesses as category head. And Amrit was also involved in the sports franchisee industry for a decade, initially as a CM of Royal Challengers Sports Private Limited, and subsequently as its chairman. And Amrit's role was a CEO of tech startups, and Amrit is also an alumnus of Harvard Business School, IIM Bangalore, and IIT Madras. Amrit also has a postgraduate certification in artificial intelligence from University of Bath. Very warm welcome to you, Amrit. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Neeraj Chandra. Neeraj is not new to us. He has spoken a couple of occasions in MMA. Neeraj is alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, and IIT Kanpur. Over 30 years of experience in sales and marketing business roles with exposure about 25 plus countries. He has held a variety of leadership roles, including the CEO of the Consumer Care Division of Emami, VP of COO and Britannia, and Regional Brand Director of Asian Unilever, and enjoyed powering up with iconic brands like Pond's and Lux and Britannia. Neeraj now helps build disruptive new businesses and transform established companies by shaping the strategy, brand, and organizations. He's also associated as an advisor and board member with business promoters and select funds in healthcare, new services, and consumer-facing sector. You all know, gentlemen, we have an outstanding panel this evening. Please use this opportunity to share your questions, if any, so that all your doubts could be cleared. The format for this evening, Mr. Balraman will introduce, set the contact. Thereafter, Mr. Amrit Thomas will do a presentation. Then Mr. Neeraj and Balraman will do an interaction with Mr. Amrit on the Q&A session. Thereafter, we will open to you for a Q&A session. Now I request Mr. Balraman for his opening introductory remarks. Over to you, Mr. Balraman.
Thank you, Group Captain. The Pons Veteran Series is geared to for our veterans, people who worked in Pons and then moved on to other companies in the world and often reached chief executive positions, to bring to you their total experience starting with Pons. You know, many of them learned leadership in Pons and went on to build on it in other companies. You have heard a number of veterans. I think we have so far heard 32 veterans. I think this is the 33rd one. And I'm most happy to be here to host Amrit and Neeraj. Now, a word about Amrit and Neeraj. See, Neeraj is someone from whom I learned a lot of marketing. I mean, he's a deep thinker, and he's someone who has total clarity on marketing, branding, consumer service, consumer experience, everything. And Amrit is someone who worked along with Neeraj, and I learned a lot of marketing from both of them. So I'm very happy to share them with you so that you learn a lot about what I learned. Now, marketing, is it an art or a science? That's a very deep question. I have often thought of marketing like, you know, what is marketing? Marketing is rationally understanding the emotional needs of a consumer and rationally devising a strategy to make an emotional appeal to the consumer and emotionally satisfy the consumer. Now, if that is confusing, Amrit and Neeraj will clarify that for you. A lot depends on the human emotions. You know, humans are driven by emotion. We often think that humans are rational. Even economists have now confessed that that is not true. The Nobel Prize winning Nobel laureates and economists have confessed that people do not always act rationally. They act emotionally. They like to, emotion is what drives them. They like to think that they are rational. It's very important for them to think and believe that they are rational. That is very fundamental to human personality. Now, as you listen to Amrit and as you listen to Neeraj, you will get a lot more clarity on this. Now, I will invite Amrit to start the presentation.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you, Mr. Balraman, for that wonderful introduction. I'm just going to share my screen, so give me a couple of seconds. And I'll get into presentation mode. I hope everyone can see the slide.
We can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. So, like Mr. Balraman was saying, I'm going to talk to you about the science and the art. I will use examples. The art is always visible in the campaigns we create. And the reason I'm deeply passionate about the science, the underlying science of marketing and what it means in terms of its implications for decision making as a marketer. Yeah. And one of my deeply held beliefs is that over time, marketing knowledge must accumulate, and therefore the science must accumulate over time so that you get better at the art. And therefore, to Mr. Balraman's question, the science must liberate the art, because you know what to say yes to when you're making decisions and what to say no to.
Sorry, would you like to put on your camera? You switched off your camera.
I've done it because I want to. As I use the videos,
Fine.
It'll be optimal on bandwidth.
Sure.
There are two
No
calls
issue.
going on.
Then it's okay
here,
if you've done it internally.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
So the second point I wanted to make was, what I'm going to do here is share with you my experience of neuroscience and the application of neuroscience in the art of product packaging and advertising creation. Yeah, and share with you the frameworks that one has used and how that can be used in a really sensible manner, far away from the hype of neuroscience. That's what I'm going to do in the next half an hour or so. And in that process, hopefully engage you with quite a few examples. I start with a very simple truth. And the simple truth is this: branded goods and services exist in society and culture. But brands, and I think this truth, I can't emphasize it less, is brands only exist in a mind. What you see on a shelf in this Pond's talcum powder image is a branded product. But what Pond stands for exists in the mind. And brands play two crucial roles. One is they stand for a certain promise, could be a set of associations, could be an idea. And they become, as a result of that, they become a heuristic for decision-making of enabling choice amongst alternatives. Yeah. They also, in many senses, become a part of our own memory structure and narrative, either as a reaffirmation of image of ourselves or as an affirmation of the image we want to project. Hence, in order to understand brands and branding, I've always believed that you need to start with some basic understanding of the nature of human memory and human decision making. So that to me is the starting point. Does that suddenly mean that we're all going to become psychologists and neuroscientists? Of course not. But we're using that science and our best understanding of that science in the current moment to guide our marketing decision making. To my mind, I need the slide to change. To my mind, the art or flair will always be central to marketing. Yeah, whether it's in the kind of campaigns that we create, or it is in the way we approach a brand growth issue or a brand challenge and seek to problem solve it, which is what Mr. Balraman was referring to as our own, in the business corporate world, our own logical, rational thought process. But there's a lot of creativity and art involved, because we are like detectives connecting the dots with half available information. Or it's the kind of culture you want to infuse into the team or the organization, so every person actually lives and breathes the brand. So I think the art of flair will always remain. The value of using and underpinning this with science, as even science is evolving, whether it's neuroscience, whether it's psychology, whether it's linguistics, because a lot of emotions, for example, is communicated through language, and the structure that communicates emotions in language is metaphors, for example. Yeah. So the underpinning science will always remain. But what combining the science and art does is fundamentally improves one's batting average. With that said, let me take a few moments to bring to life the underlying elements of the science, and then take you through how it applies, how you can apply a specific neuroscience tool that I used in the development of product packaging, point of sale material, and advertising. Yeah. So we experience the world through our senses, right? Through our 5 senses. Our senses capture the stimulus available in our environment and then sends them onwards to our brain through a set of neural structures. Yeah. And our brain consists of 1 billion neurons. We all have the same brain, but what differentiates all of us is the kind of connections neurons make in our brains. So let me straight away play the first video. This is the video of neurons firing. So let's just play this first. There is no sound in this video. Yeah. So there you can see neurons firing. And let me now play the second video. Yeah, which is then a real life simulation of how do you model this neural firing. So let me pause it here. So the first video was essentially a video created by this neuroscientist called Garrett Stuber. He used deep tissue imaging techniques, and it's essentially neurons in the hippocampus region of the mice. Yeah. And the second video is a artificial neural network simulation of the same, where an artificial neural network is being trained to recognize digits. Yeah. Like I said right in the beginning, that a neuron has no intelligence of its own. All a neuron does is that we have 1 billion neurons. Each neuron is connected to 10,000 other neurons. So there are 10 quadrillion synapses, which is the gap between 2 neurons. Yeah, and memory is encoded in the synaptic gap, and the neuron uses electricity to ping and transfer signals from one to another. Okay. Now, even though we have the same brain structures, it is the strengthening of connections in the synaptic gap that differentiates each one of us, because these connections between our neuron is entirely based on our experience that we have had in life until then. So all our mind is, it's a pattern recognition engine. It's a prediction engine based on the simple neural interface, but and it continuously classifies clusters and predicts what's going to happen, and therefore facilitates decision making. Yeah, because of the nature of neural structures, we learn through a combination of association and pattern detection. We always have this fight between novelty seeking, where we are attracted by things that are new. And remember, as children are attracted by bright sounds, right, loud noises, because they're trying to discern whether those sounds and noises are friend or foe. Yeah. So we have always got this fight between choosing things of comfort versus choosing things of novelty. Yeah. So that's the underlying structure of a brain. And what happens is, as we are going about living our lives, our neurons are constantly firing. They're firing at 1,000 times a second. In fact, as a result of which, people decide whether they have seen an advertisement in the first 800 millisecond. Yeah, that's the amount of time you take to decide before you decide whether you want to watch an advertisement or you want to do something else, or your mind or attention is diverted away. And then you're probably, the ad is at best influencing you at a very low level of attention. Yeah. So these neurons are firing at 1,000 times a second. And it is in this firing, based on our experience, that we all build memories, and we build different memories. And these memories correspond to concepts, ideas, values, and personality. So that's the first thing to understand about our mind. And I'll pull all this together on therefore, when I talk about the neurological tool, you'll realize, and the consumer choice model, you'll realize why this basic, just getting familiar with this basic construct is important. The second thing to remember is actually, is that as we are experiencing the world, we are encoding memory. Yeah? And as we are encoding this memory, not only is the experience and the elements of the experience being encoded, but feelings associated with this experience is also being encoded. Yeah. And by feeling, one is using a collective noun. Feeling stands for emotions, mood disorders, personality, and culture. So what I'm going to share with you is something that I've used to think about this. This is a schema by Oatley and Jenkins that they developed in 1996, but it gives you, and I think it's important when you talk about the science, it's important to have the same vocabulary. Yeah. The first type of feelings are essentially called autonomic emotions and self-promoted emotions. Yeah, this is that fear that we see when we suddenly see something that looks like a snake, and then we process it and say, it's scared the hell out of me. Yeah, and the lifetime or the time these emotions last, they're autonomic. They're not within our control. They are a body's response to the environment. So they're high intensity because they're designed to evoke a action. Yeah, but they last for from a few seconds to a few minutes. Yeah, and the memory of it might remain for a few hours. Yeah. Then we have two really important body states. Yeah, the first is a homeostatic body state, which is my body is, my body, different bodily parts are working. They are attempting to keep us in balance. So when you're off balance in a particular element of that body state, you might feel thirsty, you might feel tired. So that's the homeostatic body state that is giving you the feeling of thirst or tiredness. Yeah. And then there is moods, which is effectively a mirroring of the body state in the mind, where either you're feeling low, or you're feeling happy, or you're feeling energized, you're feeling active. So there are homeostatic body states, and these might last from seconds to days. Could last from seconds to days. Yeah? So this is the feeling schema, and all these different types of feelings are what drive decision making, all forms of decision making. In fact, if there is a damage to the feeling center of a brain, right, even the smallest of decisions in the morning, whether to eat with your hands or fork, becomes very difficult to make. Yeah. The next kind of feeling is actually personality and culture. Yeah, our memories are nothing but stories of ourselves. So we are always in our narratives of ourselves, right? Building a narrative of who we are, right? What do we stand for? Where are we going? What is important to us? What do we value? And we have a self-image and a projected image, and that is something that we are constantly seeking to balance. So you're always reaffirming your own personality type or projecting a certain personality type. And this finally, and you'd say, and that your personality gets shaped over decades, right? So yes, personality could change. I can vouch for the fact that my own personality changed from when I was in college to, let's say, what I am now. Personalities change, but they change much more slowly. Yeah. And finally, you have culture, which is, all this happens in culture, which is the society that we live in. We are either a part of an in-group, or we want to stand out from a certain group. And therefore, there are all kinds of norms, rituals, and beliefs that get also embedded within us, which become critical to decision making. Yeah. So all decision making are driven by these feelings. Yeah. And none of them need be rational, and this gets encoded in memory over time as we grow up. The next element of this then brings us, therefore, how does all this work? How does this lead to us choosing brands, and how do brands fit in our life? Yeah? Attention is the first form of any experience something and encoding that. So as we go about, on the left hand side, you have these 4 rectangular boxes. Left, as you're viewing the screen, you've got saliency and attention. Saliency and attention then drives us to experience the world. There are 2 forms of attention: bottom up, which means it is happening. We are beginning to live a life. We are directing attention to whatever grabs our attention. And there are top down, where our goals, objectives, tasks are driving us to focus our attention on something. That leads us to experiencing our world. We really, as consumers, I always say, we're not really interested in brands. Brands play a useful role for us in either being a shortcut to decision making, or affirming or projecting a persona. As we experience the world, feelings and emotions are being encoded in memory, and learning is being encoded in memory. So our mind map is developing and evolving as we go on experiencing the world. Yeah. Now, when you think about brand choice and you think about a particular kind of decision making, there are 2 kinds of triggers that happen. Yeah, there is a consumption trigger and a purchase trigger, and that's this trigger on the top. Yeah, the consumption trigger and the purchase trigger need not be the same, because I could buy a product and then store it in my kitchen for consumption later. So I could buy a bottle of Fenny and store it in my bar. So that was based on a purchase trigger. And the memories and the positioning of that Fenny and Fenny brand in my mind. But then there is a consumption trigger. I need to also have a trigger to decide in a particular situation to take that Fenny out of my bar or cupboard and actually pour myself a drink. Yeah, both are important. Whenever, as we go about living a life, there are situational contexts which are either consumption context or purchasing context. And sometimes purchasing context is my monthly shop, which is which is removed from the consumption context. That leads to an evocation. So as you saw those neurons firing, there leads to an evocation and representation of the kind of things that are relevant to the trigger. So let's say I'm going out shopping with a friend and I'm feeling thirsty. So that's a trigger now. That's a consumption trigger. Since I'm outside the house, the consumption trigger and purchase trigger will actually be quite near in time. Now, as I'm feeling thirsty, a whole host of gestalls, memory gestalls, neural gestalls begin surfacing from my mind. All this happens in fractions of a second, where you're implicitly in a non-conscious manner judging the value of quenching your thirst with water versus quenching your thirst with a carbonated soft drink versus quenching your thirst with a fruit juice. Yeah, or maybe even an ice cream. Yeah. So all these gestalls feature whatever is relevant that you've learned for that situational context. You choose that. So let's say me and my friend decide to have a soda, which is have a Coca-Cola. And as you make the category choice, again, implicitly, the representations of brand surface. Yeah? And brands have memory structures and mind maps. Coca-Cola is probably, if you look at Coca-Cola's advertising over time, it's more associated with refreshment and its refreshment properties. It's associated with a social situation of being amongst friends. It's associated with even having along with a snack or a food. And therefore, in that, as that representation surfaces, I'm essentially making a prediction of value that if I choose a Coke, if I choose a Coca-Cola carbonated beverage, and I choose a Coke, that has got the best value for that particular situation. Yeah. So that's from attention and evocation of choice, you move to prediction of value. And then you go and buy your Coke. You then drink your Coke. As you're drinking your Coke, you're experiencing this, not just the organoleptic properties of Coke, but you're also experiencing whether Coke is quenching your thirst. So there's this interplay between am I meeting my prediction or beating my prediction, and therefore is there a exchange of trust that is taking place between what's in memory and what your experience is. Yeah. So the experience is what happens in the moment. and value is being created not at the experience level. After we have had our Coke, you feel satisfied, you feel quenched, you feel energized, and therefore you get remembered value, which is a memory of brand liking and feeling. How the liking and feeling towards a brand is encoded in memory finally, and that goes back into your memory structure. So there are 4 steps in a consumer in this simple consumer choice model. There needs to be a trigger, which could be either a consumption trigger or a purchase trigger. There's you then what surfaces to attention is a representation and evocation of choice. You make an implicit non-conscious prediction of value. If you're then moving into, you then have an experiential value, which in the case of purchase is about the nature of shopping, which in the case of consumption is the consumption of the product or the usage of the product. And finally, there is remembered value. Yeah. So that's the basic choice model that's kind of guided me and my, and the way I've used neuroscience is to actually decode how are consumers and aggregates of consumers viewing the category and the brand, and what is really the challenge for the category stroke brand. And I'll take you through some examples. Yeah. The first example is thinking about this trigger, right? In alcohol as a category, if you're going into a bar, your purchase and consumption are almost synonymous. Yeah, they're almost together. You're sitting together. You're amongst friends. You want to celebrate that brotherhood. So you're ordering something that's right for that context, right for the mood that you want it to reflect. Yeah. So in a bar, which is right at the bottom, right, these are in synchronicity. On the other hand, take wheat flakes or corn flakes. You buy this, so the purchase occasion is separate. It's either a weekly or a monthly shop. You buy it, it goes into your kitchen, and the consumption trigger is wholly different. So not only there is a challenge of it of Kellogg's wheat flakes and corn flakes fitting into as an experience, fitting into your morning breakfast habit, but there's also a challenge of saying that once I've got people to buy it, I need people to consume it. Yeah. And I witnessed this in Europe when I was, selling a whole host of brands that were bought once a year. And then the brand went into the bar. And the reality is that you have to trigger consumption so that next time the purchase cycle comes around, the consumer is ready to buy you, rather than saying, you know what, I still have that bottle in my bar and I'm not kind of used it. Yeah. So the first takeaway from the model is always be conscious about, in your categories shopping context, there are 2 triggers. Shopping and consumption context, there are 2 triggers, which Byron Sharp refers to as buying situation. I think of it as consumption and buying situation. Yeah, both a consumption and purchase trigger. Now, that has implications for category creation, right? And what you associate at the time for category creation. The other aspect which I didn't talk about is our brain has 2 ways of encoding memory. It encodes what a product stands for and where and how to use it in different parts of the brain. Yeah, and therefore, in any when you're launching a new category, you need to educate consumers. Consumers must learn through a process of education and experience, through a process of watching marketing campaigns and experience, must learn what that particular category stands for and where and how to use it. Yeah, and I'm using a really popular example in the personal care category, where you had soaps. We really had, we've lived through the lifetime where all we had was soaps. Yeah, and we used it all over the body. And then we moved on to qualifying this is a liquid soap, which is a way of branding where you're referring to the property of a soap, or this is a body wash or a hand wash. Yeah. And that's one way to do it. And that, while that creates a clear role for is a different what in the product versus how to use it, by actually labeling it as a shower gel, not only do you get the same idea as a body wash, but you also get a certain set of premium associations being encoded with it. Yeah. And these are all real choices that we need to navigate. There is no right or wrong. You might do different things for different brands, and that's how you will manage your portfolio architecture. Yeah. Now, where does this become really interesting? So we implicitly probably went through this journey as we build these categories as marketers in our respecting market. But here is where you see a real life example playing out. We always looked as coffee as a powdered granulated product sold in a bottle or sold in packets. And ITC is trying to create this idea of a Fenty coffee, which is, it's one step removed in the process of preparing a coffee. It's therefore convenient and easy to dissolve. But think about the choices that ITC has to make, because they've called it Sunbeam, nothing wrong with the brand name, but you're calling it a beaten cafe. Yeah. So you've got a very different what in terms of the nature of the product. You've moved away from a powdered granulated form to a pasty kind of form. But where and how to use it, does the name communicate that it's a cafe, but so it's skewing some kind of experience? And that's a real choice. And that choice can make or break what could be a brilliant innovation. Yeah. So recognizing the fact that there are these two triggers, there are these two different ways by which it's called the two-stream hypothesis, by which memory is being encoded. And in our branding architecture and our branding naming, these are real choices we make. And we must actually, in some senses, understand the implications of each choice we're making, and then take the best possible decision we can. Yeah. Here's an example with a word I'm probably a little more familiar. Scotch whiskey, was really had its peak growth during the period 1950-60 to about the late 90s. Yeah, it's still continuing to grow, but not as fast as bourbon. Yeah. And Scotch whiskey, if you meet a whiskey connoisseur, is always expected to be drunk neat. Therefore, it is really an acquired taste. Over time, people have it with, or if you have it with water, if you're pouring 30 ml of whiskey, you add only 30 ml of cold water. So it becomes a very complex, challenging liquid experience. But that's how it's been sold, and it was really successful in that. Yeah. Just as sodas, carbonated beverages were taking off, along came Jack Daniels. They were a bourbon whiskey. So instead of being distilled and made in Scotland, they were made in Tennessee and Kentucky. So Jack Daniels is a Tennessee whiskey. It, by the nature of how it's made, it's got a little more sweeter profile. And they decided, saying, yes, we are a whiskey, but we're going to break some whiskey codes. Yeah. And they actually did this in the 50s and 60s, where they said, if Scotch is meant to be drunk for achievers, successful people who are stiff-shirt, right? Jack Daniels is for the working man who's climbing up the ladder. And he doesn't need a challenging drink at the end of a challenging day. What he needs is actually a Jack and Coke. Yeah. And two things happened. Not only Jack and Coke was a really lovely, accessible drink. It could be had instead of beer. Cokes as a soda was on the rise. It became an adult way of consuming maybe a Coke. And this is an amazing example of how Jack Daniels as a brand borrowed certain attributes from whiskey as a category that Scotch and malts took a long while to build, but shifted some of these category codes to create a distinctive and a very successful space in itself. Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that I learned is that actually what competes best with Jack Daniels is not another Scotch whiskey, right? Probably maybe an Irish whiskey, but actually what actually competes well with Jack Daniels were a rum and Coke or a gin and tonic, yeah, because they were equally accessible drinks drunk in similar moments. Yeah? So this is what I mean by understanding the difference between a what and a how, and how to play and mix it together to drive growth for your brands. I then move on. I essentially used, I talked about brain science. I then used neuroscience toolkits, which was effectively what we had was a neurolab. And the neurolab brought consumers in, about 30 consumers in, if you were tasting a product. These consumers came in, they wore a EEG cap that measured their brain signals at called the P300 response, 200 or 500 times a second. And what this did as far as the product was concerned was there was a set of anticipatory steps and a set of consumption steps. So the consumer came in, they wore the cap, a baseline of how the brain was functioning was recorded, and then they were allowed to view the product. So these are 3 different types of blends. The blue is blend 1, the red is blend 2, and the yellow is a premium blend. This is all happening in blind. They then smell the product. They're obviously in the view and smell, say, experiencing the color of the product. And then they take the first sip. Yeah. They then do a sip of air, and then they take the second sip. Yeah. Now notice what happens here. How the combination of color and aroma actually shape the response to the blend. Right. We also realize, therefore, taste and aroma are 2 sides of the same coin. And we also realized that you could play around with the visual properties of the product, the aroma, to actually create a distinctive competition beating experience. So effectively, blend 1 and blend 2 are actually the same blends from a whiskey liquid profile perspective, but vary in the way they play around with color and aroma. Yeah. And that gives you, and what you want is this not only a great first response, but a holding second response. We clearly were beating competition with both our blends. And then we used a midway approach between blend 1 and blend 2 as we went to the market. So that's one example of using neuroscience. All we were measuring was experiential value. You've got no perception shaping you, just the blind experience of the product. Does it beat competition? Yeah. And look at what I'm doing. I'm just deconstructing each one of the P's, right? Saying it works at a product level. So I have taken that out of saying, my product is better than competition, or at least competitive vis-a-vis competition. The second is packaging design. On advertising and packaging design, what effectively you measured by measuring neural signals and this P300 response was, there were 3 primary measures: memory activation, emotional engagement, and attention. And action intent was a combination of memory activation and emotional engagement. Yeah. So what you also did was you were also here you see 2 different types of packaging design: brand and market, competition and market, and new design. And we were trying to improve the action intent of the new design while remaining being better than competition on effectiveness, but at least on par with our brand and market. Yeah. Now, remember that packaging, because it's intrinsically branded, is a combination of all your historical advertising and what it stands for. So it's a combination of predicted and experience value. And the thing we were trying to dial up is actually, we wanted the new design to dial up premium association, because if you look at competition was seen as more premium than our packaging and market. Yeah. So we wanted to dial up our premium association, and that's what we succeeded doing. Again, I'm taking one mix element, and in the case of packaging at a branded plus unbranded level, the combination of the 2, I'm trying to create and ensure that the mix is competitive. Yeah. And all of this is experimental design, that you are comparing a new design versus competition and the in-market brand. Yeah. A third example is here on point of sale material. One of the state of science is such that our visual system and its impact on the brain can be simulated with an accuracy of about 85%. And in order to, can be simulated with an accuracy of 85%. So with point of sale material, what we did, one, we knew we had a winning packaging, right? We used actually a tool called NeuroVision. That was essentially an app-based tool that, based on your packaging POS design, yeah, basically predicted where would eye movements go, in what order would it go, is there visual clutter, and therefore are you landing the main message, and is the main message being branded? So as you move, as you see, as we evolved from stage 0 to stage 1, and sometimes with creative directors, it becomes really hard to have this conversation, right? You realize how the final step became far more simpler, right? You got to your main message, which was about projecting a bold lifestyle, The message was intrinsically branded, and you got to that. Yeah, so that's point of sale design. We use the same thing on advertising, right? You're measuring on action intents and brand resonance. So how well branded is it? And is the combination of memory activation and emotion better than competition? So you have, if you look at your right-hand most visual, you have competition in D, you have creative A, B, and C. And these three executions, we were testing three executions. All executions were working better than competition on action intent, but one execution was a little more branded. Yeah, and that's, you're therefore designing advertising for memory activation and emotional engagement. So by actually unpeeling the mix and ensuring each element of the mix is working better than competition, what you then do is you realize that if the mix is not working in market, then there are only two variables that are that you haven't assessed. You haven't assessed your execution in terms of point of sale execution and media execution, and you haven't taken into account competitive intensity and competitive action. So it really simplifies your approach to diagnosing in market performance. This advertising effectiveness also actually liberated our creatives, because we could make we could leave the debate to editing the film to 30 seconds or 15 seconds to the last. You created the film of the right length, which evoked the right emotions. And because you were tracking emotional engagement and memory activation second by second, you could compress it. So in this table, you could see I have reduced creative duration by 30 to 50%. And I've got actually between a single digit to a double digit improvement in effectiveness. Let me show you an example through two ads. So here's the 60-second for director special whiskey. But since we don't advertise whiskey, you advertise the extension, which is soda. Sorry, let me just play the ad.
सेवंथ फ्लोर वाली ऑफिस की एग्जीक्यूटिव है, यहाँ तेरी दाल नहीं गलेगी।
आज लंच के लिए कहीं बाहर चलें?
क्या?
यहाँ का खाना बकवास है, कहीं और ट्राई करें?
मैं तुम्हें जानती भी नहीं हूँ। Seriously?
पास्ता खाने चलते हैं?
Excuse me? Behave yourself. मैं तुम्हारे साथ कहीं नहीं आ रही।
Let me call you back यार, यहाँ बहुत आवाज है। I'm sorry, आप मुझसे कुछ कह रही थी।
I'm sorry. मुझे लगा आप मुझसे बात कर रहे हैं।
Oh, I'm Siddharth by the way.
I'm Neena.
Neena, यहाँ का खाना वाकई पास्ता खाने चले?
Okay.
बनो अपनी किस्मत का डायरेक्टर। DSP Black Soda.
Now see the 30-second.
सेवंथ फ्लोर वाली ऑफिस की एग्जीक्यूटिव है, यहाँ तेरी दाल नहीं गलेगी।
आज लंच के लिए कहीं बाहर चलें?
क्या? Seriously?
पास्ता खाने चलते हैं?
Behave yourself.
Let me call you back यार। I'm sorry, आप मुझसे कुछ कह रही थी।
I'm sorry. मुझे लगा आप मुझसे बात कर रहे हैं।
Oh, I'm Siddharth by the way.
I'm Neena.
पास्ता खाने चले?
Okay.
बनो अपनी किस्मत का डायरेक्टर। DSP Black Soda.
So we found this to be a really effective tool for actually liberating the creative process, yet and ensuring we don't have endless debates on edits as we started editing to get the right mix and the right average creative duration. So that was about using neuroscience in the mix development process in the assessment of mix. In the end, like I said, brands exist in the mind. They have a set of memory structures associated with it. So as you think about brand positioning, not only do you want to think about the feeling schema as to which mood and personality type are you kind of targeting, and what, and yes, there is an underpinning of functionality, but you also need to think about consumer consumption need states and how you target it. And one of the tools that I really found that I think is effectively, and it's never sold as such, is the need scope developed by Kantar. To me, need scope is nothing but an aggregated, shared mind map of consumers at any given point in time for a particular category. And the reason I believe it is so is because it's a shared mind map. Actually, across categories, you find the same set of universal needs emerging. The words might differ, the category right positioning themes might differ, but the same set of accesses emerge. Yeah, it's also closely aligned with personality type. So if you move in the direction of love, harmony, and closeness, you are effectively right at building an affiliative, accessible, and friendly personality. You over dial on that axis, right? You can be seen as a weak and clingy brand or a weak and clingy person. So you need a balance between the axis. But I've always found because of the underlying assumptions that brands are positioned in mind, they're nothing but memory structures. We needed a tool that created a mind map within our consumer audience. Yeah, and I found NeedScope to be a really effective tool. Here's an example of the coffee NeedScope on the same thing. So you can see the different kind of occasions or situation: a break in the day, a quiet chat, a social get together, an upbeat even, a big hit, which is early in the morning, getting yourself that big hit, getting things done. Yeah, these are all coffee themes or coffee positioning opportunities. And you have the same one in alcohol as well. Yeah, and I've kind of flipped the, so you've got on the side of love, you've got moments to celebrate. And as I move in an anti-clockwise direction, you've got the choice of a brand means I'm standing out, I'm separating myself, I'm bolder, and I've got a bolder, more independent lifestyle. Moving further anti-clockwise, you're talking about a lively, upbeat moment, or you're talking about connection moments. And moving further, you're talking about familiar moments and moments to savor. Yeah. So you basically see the words might be different, the axes might be flipped, but effectively, across, and I've within Unilever, I had the opportunity of viewing this across multiple categories. You see the same universal needs emerge. Yeah. And that becomes a really good opportunity for then actually thinking about positioning that combined with mood and cultural insight, thinking about positioning. I've just got a few set of ads. It'll take about 8 minutes. I'll show you a couple. So this is when we were actually sharpening and with the Diageo's acquisition of United Spirits, we were sharpening the number one positioning. And our insight was as follows. We basically said, we exist to celebrate the bonds of brotherhood. So it's an affiliative, friendly, playful, friendly, approachable kind of brand. So that was its personality type. It was a brand that valued loyalty and openness. The consumer insight was, in an ever-changing, uncertain, predatory world, your close friends kind of anchor you. They help you become the best version of yourself. Yeah. So you see how I'm taking the context of friendship and giving friends a role in life, and that role is linked to becoming a better version of yourself. But it's not an achievement-oriented brand. It's a brand that's still anchored in friendship. We also used music and poetry. So one of the things that we did in this brand was, because of the nature of the positioning space, we used music and poetry to very powerfully evoke emotions. I'll show you the long version of the campaign, the digital AV campaign, which has had millions of views. This is when we completely relaunched the brand. I hope it plays here. It's a YouTube link. It's a longish ad, but it's still one of my favorite pieces of music. So, sorry, it's playing in. Let me just get.
अच्छा, अगर हम तीनों में से मैं फेवरेट निकला, तुम दोनों को बुरा तो नहीं लगेगा ना?
तो 3 टर्म निकल गई।
हर आसमां से ऊंची है, समंदरों से गहरी, ऐसी वैसी दोस्ती नहीं, ऐसी वैसी दोस्ती नहीं, ये नंबर
मेरा यार,
यारी है,
मेरा यार,
वन यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है। छाँव में धूप में जाने कितने रूप में, ये तपी है, ये जली है, सोना बनके ये बिली गलियों से गुजरी है, बरसों सबरी है, ऐसी वैसी दोस्ती नहीं, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है। जाने कितने रूप में, ये तपी है, ये जली है, सोना बनके ये मिली गलियों से गुजरी है, बरसों सबरी है, ऐसी वैसी दोस्ती नहीं, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है।
यार हम अगर इतने सारे बन खाएंगे ना तो एक दिन जरूर कुछ बन जाएंगे।
कभी तो जोड़ती, भटकूं कभी तो मोड़ती,
ये पागल है क्या? इसको बड़ा किया नानी ने, अभी नानी बीमार है तो जाएगा नहीं। क्यों? क्योंकि पैसे नहीं है ना? पैसे हैं भाई, पैसे हैं, ये देख,
हर खुशी
पैसे हैं, ये ले,
हर गम में, अच्छे बुरे मौसम में,
नाटक मत कर, निकल। और ये भी
हमसे करती बात है, साए जैसी साथ है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ऐसी वैसी दोस्ती नहीं, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है।
जापना स्नाचीज पे एक एहसान कर दे, उस पहाड़ के इस तरफ की बंजर जमीन इसके नाम कर दे।
बाबा क्या बात है, क्या बात है। अब एक काम और करेंगे, ये बड़े बड़े पहाड़, ये हंसी वादियां, ये सेब के बगीचे, बस क्या रहा है, तुझे नहीं मिला।
हर आसमां से ऊंची, समंदरों से गहरी, ये नंबर 1 यारी है, ये नंबर 1 यारी है।
गुड इवनिंग मैम।
तुम तीनों, after so many years, come in, come. मुझे याद है तुम तीनों का हंसना एक साथ, रोना एक साथ, हारना और झगड़ना भी एक ही साथ होता।
मैम एक बात पे तो हम कई सालों से झगड़ रहे हैं। हम तीनों में से आपका फेवरेट कौन था?
था नहीं, थी तुम तीनों की यारी।
जश्न है, रंग है, ये जहां संग है, यही पंख भी, उड़ान भी, अरमा भी, आसमां भी, इस पल से जिंदगी तक ये दुनिया सारी है, ये नंबर वन यारी है, ये नंबर वन यारी है।
बॉयज ऐसे ही रहना, डोंट एवर चेंज।
मैकडॉवेल्स नंबर 1 सोडा, असली यारी का नंबर 1 स्पिरिट।
So you can see how we took mood, personality, right, insight, and a cultural space to actually really sharply position the brand as one that's celebrating the bonds of brotherhood or bonds of friendship. And what I want to end with is taking a very, this is McDowell's number 1 is a really is India's largest whiskey. On the other hand, you go to the other end of the spectrum and you have Black Dog whiskey, which was a Scotch brand. It was it is one of India's fastest and largest bottled in India scotches. And a Scotch brand had never been positioned in a space that was not statusful, not meant for moments to celebrate, or not meant for the connoisseur. Yeah, and we again used a combination of mood and personality and a cultural trope to actually take a Scotch brand and make it about contentment without losing a sense of luxury that a Scotch brand should have. So here's Black Dog whiskey. The purpose of this brand or its positioning was about encouraging achievers to unwind and relax. The insight was, the big insight was, even without regular pit stops, even a Formula One can fail. Yeah, we are but human beings. We need a pause to rejuvenate so that we can then stay ahead. Yeah? The personality of this brand was about your confidence to actually take that break in your busy life. So it was about being confident and sociable and contented. The values were actually a unhurried sense of luxury. So you can see that evoked in not just the proposition, it's triple matured, therefore that takes that much longer. It's truly and therefore truly refined. Also in the visual that's captured here. But let me also play the director's cut of the campaign. Let's see if this plays. And that's pretty much the last video.
A pause is for camaraderie. A pause is for togetherness. A pause is for inspiration. A pause is for the finer things. A pause is for all things beautiful. A pause is for perfect harmony. A pause is for laughter. Take the time for all the things that truly matter. For life is in the pause. Black Dog Sparkling Water. Let the world wait.
So here again, you could say how we're using situations, mood, using the score to create a certain mood, how the elements of the campaign is actually reflecting the personality that we are projecting. You also notice across these two, if brands are about memory and memory structures, then one of the things we started doing was ensuring we're creating distinctive assets. In the case of Black Dog, it was the pause symbol that was getting integrated into the brands as one of the brand assets. In the case of McDowell's #1, it was the idea of a hug. Yeah. And in summary, essentially, what using a model of this kind, using a brand choice model, which is based on neuroscience, what it allows you to do is it clearly articulates for you the kind of tools you use. So if I want to understand the current mind map of the market, I would use need scope and ethnographic studies, which will give me a sense of the cultural space, the personality space, and the mood space in which to position the brand. I can use an EEG-based, EEG, eye tracking, galvanic skin response-based tool to understand predictive and experiential value. And then a lot of our traditional qualitative research or implicit association tests or quantitative attribute profiles of even Millward Brown's brand dynamics are measuring remembered value. And you can actually combine these different disparate pieces of information to diagnose what's happening to a brand and make the right choices as you create campaigns to grow the brand. Yeah. So that's it from my side. That's a long and short of it. Over to all of us to discuss, challenge, or go deeper.
Neeraj, you would like to interact with him? Thoughts? You unmute yourself, sir.
Just a second.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Though I'm fascinated by the deep science of it and how it's been applied into an area which is so practical and so much of creating an impact. And really, it set me thinking about the role of various things. But I'll just share with everybody just one thing which strikes, and maybe there'll be more as people raise other questions on this. So there is certainly 2 or 3 things which Amrit has been saying, which is making a point that one, there is an underlying model, a science, a way of doing things into everything we do. Yes, there is a balance between the art and the science, but there is an element of what we call quote unquote the science. And I think that's very, very important stuff which is there. And this dilemma exists in various things, like what makes art a craft, right? There's a difference between the two. A kind of a codification makes the art into a craft, which doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse, but it's different. Simply what makes a science into a technology. But this whole area of understanding the model behind it and using it rather than just trying to create on a spontaneous basis has its role, which is very, very important in this entire stuff. I think the other point which Amrit made is that in this entire stuff, at the heart of all our actions and all our doing things in the marketplace is our mind. And understanding how the mind works and engages with the real world is very, very important. How do you understand it? How to utilize it is very, very critical. And this can be as critical in buying a car as in buying a soap or in buying a shampoo, right? And I think understanding how the mind works, how people make a choice is very critical to building our businesses and brands. Right? That's the second big takeaway which I was getting out of it. And this was a fascinating illustration of this entire stuff. Of course, in this, we can operate at various levels. It's like when you're writing a piece of code, you can write a code in machine language, you can write a code in a higher language, depending on the use which you have. So that understanding can then be used at different levels of action. And that is very, very fundamental, I think. Just one point which struck me in this using of this stuff across, which I just try to share, and then I'll leave it open to others also. You know, very often you have a situation where the mind works in terms of external stimulus building in a certain memory, some ways in which the memory gets pulled out, some ways in which the memory triggers action. And really, one of the questions is, which do we want to reinforce the most? So, for example, when you make a product with very strong sensorials, you're trying to build, you need to focus on the first part of it, of giving a very strong experience, so you embed the memory. Now, is that more important, or is pulling out the memory with associates more important? It can vary by the category. And really, a marketeer's skill is to decide where does he want to put his entire effort or the discriminating effort in this entire exercise. And that is important. Now, basically, these fundamentals apply, but how do you apply it to a category? There's a lot of variety which we can explore and dig out further. But over to the rest. But initially, these are some of the thoughts which struck me while Amrit was going on and explaining things around.
Sorry, I'm a bit distracted by a wasp in my vicinity.
Raman, you're unmute. Would like to say something?
I think we should give it to the leave it open to the questions right now, Guru Captain.
Okay, we'll try and take as many questions possible, maybe 2-3 of them before we come to the end. We have got a couple of questions, and over 700 viewers are watching this program live in various platforms. One of the questions which has come from Mr. Guru Raj is that it's a very fascinating presentation. So I want to know, sir, attention span on visual advertisement. How do you get it right? The cost of an ad, the impact, the duration, how to get things right when you're planning for a visual impactful advertisement. Mr. Amrit, the question to you.
Amrit, you please unmute yourself.
No, sorry. No, it's a really great question. I think the first thing to recognize is it's now proven beyond doubt that while attention is important, and advertising must capture attention, all marketing and advertising works with low levels of attention. Okay, and the way remember that when whatever marketing campaign you're running, you create a campaign, you distribute the campaign through media and different kinds of media channels. Consumers are ultimately making a choice whether they can direct their attention and watch the ad or not. And they're doing it based on their past memory or their situational context. One of the best examples I give for this is when we are in the market for a car, when you're thinking of buying a car, we suddenly start seeing a lot of car advertising. I saw no alcoholic beverage advertising while I was in Unilever. But when I started working for Diageo, I can't help but see all kinds of alcoholic beverage advertising. So the mind has a relevance filter, interest filter that automatically begins directing attention to things that matter to us. And advertising is targeting one of those things. And therefore, Byron Sharp talks about being clear about the situational context, the consumption and buying context. So first point I want to make is that advertising works at low levels of attention. Therefore, what you want to do in an advertising and marketing campaign is be clear about your emotional territory, the kind of emotion you're seeking to evoke, the persona and the user image that you're projecting through the ad, the mood you're seeking to create. Be really clear about that territory and idea. And if you think about how I was thinking about Number One or Black Dog, we had a really sharp idea on role of the brand, which is something that I learned for Neeraj. What's the role of the brand in the life of a consumer? Yeah. Versus, and therefore what its emotional territory should be. The second thing you do is you think about the mind map and you think about what exists in consumer's mind and how do you hook your what you're creating into an existing memory structure. Because remember that creating new memories is always much more harder. So you need a hook and an anchor within existing memory. So in the case of Black Dog, it was the idea of a pause. Yeah. In the case of McDowell's Number One is really the mood that close friends evoked and the role they could play with their life. And then you use the hug as an anchor for memories. Yeah. So you actually, every marketing campaign is, I think, working with two things, right? What memory structures are you activating? What do you want to build? Like Neeraj said, is it the sensorial aspect of the product? Is it the impact of the product? What do you want to build because that is new to you? And therefore, what is the kind of emotional engagement you create? Yeah. And the tools that I shared with you was trying to give us one more data point to work our way through it at a individual mix level, because I'm not trying to evaluate the impact of the entire mix, but I'm trying to evaluate only the impact of a point of sale material or the impact of packaging or the impact of advertising. Yeah. And that allows us to then get the right level of confidence behind making those big investments in marketing.
Amrit, may I just add on to that?
Yeah. Yes, please, Neeraj.
I think this whole dilemma between optimization, how to optimize, how to get a better impact has always been there. In that context, the two things which strike, which I just like to put on the table. So I do think associations make a big difference. What's there in the mind and when you tickle them, it makes a big difference. But as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But there's something even bigger than a picture. And I think that was very well exemplified in the first ad which Amrit showed, which was on the friendship one. When you lift not just an association, you lift an idea. And the first film actually built up this whole concept of friendship and put it on a pedestal. And therefore, it is such a powerful thing, much more powerful than any other association. Now, that won't come by optimization. That will come by the power of the idea. So yes, optimization plays a role. Associations plays a role, but your underlying thought actually makes you jump beyond that. And I think the first film was a brilliant example of that. Yeah. I think there's another aspect here which is important. A lot depends on what is the model by which you want your communication or any other element of the mix to work. So for example, when you look at the digital space, there are two kinds of things that people do in conventional advertising. They put a film on television, but they try and optimize the film to trigger the right emotions, right? But when you see it, you're not very clear because you may see it while you're watching television, when you're doing something else. On the other hand, the model on the digital world often is that you're already in the mind looking for something. And therefore, even if a message is not fully optimized, it's seeking out where is your mind seeking that message. So the balance is shifting from finding you in the right mind state to delivering the best trigger there. Yes, of course, if we have both, it works even better. But this difference leads to a different kind of optimization. So in your search engine, you're trying to find the right consumer to put the message in, right? In the other case, you're trying to put the right message in. So there are different ways of looking at this.
No, I agree, Neeraj. And in fact, the build is therefore you're right. So, and that goes back to the feeling schema and this role for culture, right? So the big idea in the McDowell's Number One was about the cultural idea of friendship and the role of friendship in culture and its importance in one's life and journey. and therefore it then becomes that much more long lasting as an idea and a brand platform as anything else. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to do was, which you touched on in terms of digital space, is one of the reasons we moved towards this long format creation is actually what we realized was that when you then come to the digital space, because you already have signals from the consumer, you can surface the right situational context through dynamic creative optimization. So we realized that two things the digital space allowed us to do. One was that it allows us to tell a bigger story, and consumers who were interested in the story, so who were really in love with the idea of friendship, would go and watch the 7-minute film and would love it, would talk about it, would blog it, would comment on it, and there would be a conversation that takes place in culture. Yeah. We also had the opportunity of pulling out moments from the film and serving it in the right situational context to drive the right trigger. So we realized that this idea of the long format film not only worked for consumers who were searching for a certain set of themes, they also allowed us to re-engineer the creative supply chain to deliver different edits at different moments as consumer signals were visible to us.
Thank you, sir. One last question. I think we totally gone out of time. Is a question from Mr. Manu from Coimbatore. What he wants to say, how much it will help a marketer to understand the feeling and emotions. Can you please share with us your experience in this, how much success you achieved in this sphere through your medium, which you have done very effectively. You also want to know, sir, how does mind mapping and mind management helps to influence marketing of consumer preferences?
So it's not mind management. You're basically trying to understand what are the feelings that are relevant to those situations, and you're trying to ensure that one brand in a particular situation is being preferred over another brand. Yeah. So it's not as much as there is a lot of debate on, in the end, all of us as human beings have the ability to intervene on any decision and make the right choice because of a set of imposed cultural values stroke norms. Yeah? And therefore, I don't see it as mind management. I see it as the fact is that brands always existed in the mind for hundreds of years. Research was always about accessing that mind and understanding what it meant, and therefore what was the insight. I see an insight as nothing but a memory peg on which to hang your entire, on which to build your entire campaign on. And all that science is doing today is just bringing clarity to the process of doing what we have done for hundreds of years, which is about enabling choice. And that's the role brands play in society. It enables choice. It enables the encapsulation of an idea. Today, brands are encapsulating ideas like sustainability, right? Being environmentally friendly and using the intrinsic commercial nature of the world to move society in a particular direction. Yeah. So I think that's the role for emotions and understanding of the mind that I think marketers can use to play, I think, a really positive role in society. One of the big things that we did in Diageo was also think about, and I didn't show you that campaign, think about diversity and inclusion, and actually build that into our creation of the campaign, because we believe that at least a significant part of our cultural viewpoints is shaped by advertising. So I think marketing and marketers can be a really positive force in society if they adapt these tools with the right intent in mind.
Thank you, Amrit. A number of questions come. We're totally out of time. Somebody asked, how do you make advertisement visually impact people, get the feel more than the noise, sound, and so many things have come. But since we are totally out of time, we have come to the end. And thank you so much. Now I'll request Mr. Balraman for his closing comments. In the meanwhile, your feedbacks are very, very important. We'll just show the feedback. Please do share your feedback so that it helps us to plan our future programs correctly. Over to you, Mr. Balraman.
Thank you, Group Captain. Amrit, a brilliant presentation, bringing very complex points, and somehow you managed to put them all together and convey it. And Neeraj, thank you for bringing clarity and emphasizing what is most important. To our audience, it's very important to understand the role of marketing in our life. I mean, see, marketing serves us to understand what exactly we want and why we want it, and how do we satisfy that need. So marketing plays a very fundamental role in life and more than in business. So we will bring more marketing programs to you. And thank you, Amrit, and thank you, Neeraj.
Not at all. My pleasure. Thanks, Neeraj.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much, sir.
Balram.
Thanks once again, Amrit and Neeraj. And it's fascinating. All the viewers watching the program, if any of your colleagues have missed it, please tell them to log in. The recording is available. And as a token of our appreciation, Amrit, this is what we continue to do, still continue to do that, is our team, on your behalf, we are pleased to present 300 face masks
Thank you.
to the needy people. In addition to that, we'll also go around the people because you spared so much of your valuable time. That makes us really the brand MMA and the talk what you offered really very fascinating. So on your behalf, we do this, do some vaccination camps, give some ration, take care of the people. We do some night tuition. All this we do as even a charity from our side on behalf of you, so that you are the one who really inspired us to bring in some quality programs. Thanks so much, Amrit. Thank you, Neeraj, and thanks, Mr. Balraman, for joining us this evening. And it's a great evening. All the ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, stay healthy till we meet again. Bye-bye and good night. And take both the jabs and social distancing. Somebody said social distancing is nothing. So you have to have a social separation. That's what makes you very, very safe. Thanks so much and good night.
Thank you.
Again.
Good night. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Stop recording.